guest. He and I have had a chance to meet a couple times and talk about what he's working on and what he's done. Some crazy highlights from his career. Uh, as a lot of entrepreneurs, he saw a different way of doing it early on, and he has gone down a pretty cool path. Launched Elion Partners. Is that how I pronounce it correctly?
That's right.
Elion Partners. They had $4 billion on assets under management in the real estate vertical. Pretty crazy. And now he's working on some cool stuff. We'll talk about it a little bit later in the episode. But Juan, great to have you on, man. Excited to have you on the show today.
Hey, Josh, thanks for having me. It's been great to get to know you better and talk about some of the stuff that we're doing. So, looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Juan, you've done so much. So, what is it that everyone should stop doing in business today?
Well, one of the things that I've always noticed, as you mentioned, looking at a different way of doing things, it just seems like everybody is chasing outcomes. And what I mean by that is there's an old adage that I've really taken on and I heard along the way, and it became really a part of me, which is tell me how you measure me and I'll tell you how I behave. And we have all these KPIs that we get measured by, whether it's sales quota, total revenue, net profit, that drives a lot of our behaviors. And we become very outcome focused. And we don't really spend enough time peeling back the onion and really understanding what is it that's driving those outcomes and how can I make that better?
Mm. Man, that's so true. You mentioned before about being reactive. Everyone's very reactive in their approach. What exactly do you mean by that?
Yeah, that's a again, as an outcome based society or organizations, we become very reactive in what we do. And when we're chasing an outcome, we're basically reacting to whatever's in front of us, right? We tend
Mhm.
to really focus on what's most urgent and not what's important. So I think as a organizations or as people, if we take the time to really understand what are the processes that are driving the outcomes, right? Like what are the systems that are really working for me, so that I can become reliable and repeatable in the outcomes I'm achieving. And I think
Mm.
slowly we can change from feeling like life is running us or outcomes are running us to really us getting on the driver's seat and becoming much more proactive in what we can do.
Mm. Can you give me an example of what holds these companies back from a reactive behavior that you see?
Well, I mean, I immediately think about sales, right, which is the world that we're living in, and uh, in when it comes to sales, we're all driven by hitting our number.
Hmm.
And so salespeople, sales managers, CROs, all the people in the organization that are touching the sales outcome are so focused on the number that they're constantly chasing a deal, chasing the shiny object, and they're not taking the time to really understand what is it about my sales process that's driving the result. And so, one of the things that we talked about earlier is the 80/20 rule that so many of us sort of accept as real, right? 20% of my people are going to produce 80% of my revenue. And when you really sit down and think about it, is what is it that that 20% does differently? And it seems to me that what they do is that they naturally know what to work on and not waste time. And time gets wasted because we're just chasing an outcome. We're not taking the time to understanding what is a repeatable process and a repeatable system that I can do so that I can ultimately achieve my goals.
Mm. Mm. Where have you seen that in sales the most, like chasing these activities? Is this like follow ups or outreach, or what have you seen salespeople latch on to, especially in leadership?
Well, I mean, what I immediately thought about is I interact a lot with sales leaders, obviously, and I had a VP of sales tell me that the way he describes his weekly sales meeting is a lot of people embellishing, trying to make themselves sound like they're going to hit their number. And I think he's very accurate, right? Because there's no real deep insight of what is it that's driving the result. So, you know, you might have salespeople. We all know salespeople that get latched on to maybe a big deal. They're talking to a lot of different people in the organization, and they just don't know what are the real triggers that are going to help me to understand the outcome. So, if we really had the ability to understand variables such as time consumption or conversion rates or the combination of deal size and all these different KPIs that ultimately build up a healthy pipeline, then I'm not going to become so latched on the outcome that I waste a lot of time and I'm not effective. So what we've seen is that when an organization really takes the time to understand their process, make sure that the data that they're gathering is consistent with their process, the conversation shifts, right? You change from a chaotic sort of activity-driven environment, everybody wanting to make it sound like they're busy and they're going to get to their goal, to really talking about to what's really valuable in driving the process. And it's really awesome to witness the change in what it gets raised as the important items to talk about. And all of a sudden you hear people talking about time consumption and the right mix of deals so that they can ultimately be reliable in the outcome.
What should leaders do instead of being reactive?
Well, I think the first step is understanding that structure and process is valuable. I think the reason that this seems to come up in sales or in entrepreneurship is because everybody is so driven by the result that they don't take the time to put a process in place or to put structure in place. I like to talk about that there is a return on structure, right? Everybody talks about return on investment. Everybody talks about all these different kinds of returns, but there is a return on structure. And when you take the time to balance where you're focusing your time, and if you recognize as the first step that process and structure does matter, then you're going to, as a leader, approach solving an immediate need in a different way, right? It's not just getting this off my desk to solve it, but it's what process do I put in place so I do it right the next time and the next time after that. And then your flywheel of process starts to take over.
What does this look like in practice of doing a process-driven approach?
Well, like
Any
I was
specific
saying, I mean,
examples or yeah, go ahead.
sure. I think I can think about, one of our customers and what we're doing now, where they had a lot of revenue, they had a lot of reps. I think they had over 40 reps. And interestingly enough, the CRO and the CEO had an ongoing discussion of whether or not small deals mattered, right? One of them wanted to just focus on big deals. The other one kept saying, but small deals do matter. And it was this running argument that they had. When we came in and really helped them to understand what their data was really saying in a very, efficient way, we helped them to realize, first of all, that their revenue split was 50-50, that there was a definitive breaking point in deal size where those were the larger deals and the smaller deals. And then when we started to understand what their sales cycle and their conversion rates were on the larger deals versus the smaller deals, what ended up happening, and I'll take you to the end because it was probably a couple of weeks of conversations and understanding the data. They ended up realizing that their small deals were very important, but they had a huge untapped potential in the larger deals. And what they did is they structured their sales team with the visibility of understanding which combination of deals they needed to focus on so that they were strategic in the way that they went about following up with these. And they untapped an increase of revenue because of it.
That's so cool. It's funny. I had a meeting even earlier today where we were talking about, their discussion was like, every deal is different was basically their discussion. And I was like, well, data actually tends to show you that it's usually in buckets that's very similar. And they're like, no, 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 data, it's completely different every single time. And I was like, okay, well, how about this? Let's put it in the CRM and then let's see what happens when we extract it. So how did
Yeah.
you get the team to a place where you were saying, hey, let's discuss this and let's put the process in place over a couple weeks to be able to figure out what is the story? What is the data telling us? How did you do that?
Well, I mean, I guess that's at the core of what we're doing now, right? At Intelligence with our algorithm platform, when we connect with an existing CRM, and I'm sure what everybody's doing right now is rolling their eyes and saying, "Oh, CRM data is not good," and they're for the most part right, unless they elevate the importance of the data. But what our algorithms do is immediately focus on variables that ultimately are the ones that matter in a sales process. And so when we connected plug and play and we saw the first outcome of their data, immediately what we saw was a huge gap from their average deal size and their median deal size. And that to me screams of different types of deals being mixed into one single pipeline. When you're
Mm-hmm.
only thinking about the outcome of revenue, you never think about whether or not you're mixing apples and oranges in your pipeline. But when you plug it
Mm,
in and you see this massive difference between your average deal size and your median deal size, it begs the question, let's look at the data that's feeding this and let's see where the breakpoint is. That's when we looked
mm,
at the prior year and we saw that there was a definitive size that broke the smaller deal from the larger deal. And so, with a very simple, and you know this better than I do, with a very simple tagging of the deals, we were able to segregate the pipeline into two and then show them what their actual conversion rates and average sales cycle lengths and where they were better in the larger deals and
that's
in the
cool.
smaller deals.
That's
So by
cool.
doing that, the consequence was simple. Take the team members that are better at the larger deals and devote them to that and untap that potential. Don't bog them down with these smaller deals that they saw as a nuisance. And then take your other reps that are better at those smaller deals that have faster velocity, focus them there, and then everybody is focused on their highest and best use. But you can't do
Mm,
that without the structure and the visibility to really understand what is it that I need to be working on. And that's what we mean by a process first approach.
mm. That's a fantastic example. How does the 80/20 rule, probably more with reps in particular, factor into this? Is it something we should accept or should we challenge it? Like,
Yeah, well, I love challenging accepted myths that are out there. And I think in the 80/20, with the 80/20 rule, I'll tell you, we see it all the time. You know, again, we plug in our platform to CRMs, and I love asking the question from sales leaders, who's your superstar? Because everybody knows who their superstar is. And we simply select the superstar, and then we can compare what their conversion rates, what their pipeline structure, what their timelines look like versus the overall average. So what we allow them to do is simply say, let's apply this timeline, these conversion rates to the quota of every one of the reps. And what our platform does is give a very simple single screen guidance of, look, this is exactly how many deals you need to have at each step all the time. So if
mm,
you take a rep that tends to maybe get over focused on the bottom of the pipeline, or maybe get over focused on the top of the funnel, maybe because of a personality issue, maybe because of an insecurity, there's a lot of different reasons that can drive behaviors. When you have that level of visibility, all of a sudden as a leader, you're not just driving the outcome, you're actually calling the rep and saying, hey, I can see that you've got a lack of deals at the top of the funnel. How can I support you? Or these at the bottom are sort of aging out. How can I support you to close them? And so
mm,
that's when the changes and the conversation changes. And you can really elevate the 80% that's not as naturally efficient with the process. You can elevate their results and elevate their outcomes by giving them that level of understanding and visibility in a very easy way to follow.
mm. What data or visibility do teams need to be able to become more process driven?
Well, you know, I was just on on a call yesterday with a 10-person sales team, and we were talking about intelligence and talking about their data, and one of them said to me, I just don't have time. I just don't have time to update the CRM. I don't have time. I just need to keep up with my emails and just let me go sell. And so the question I asked him was, aren't you a part of an organization, right? Like, you are a part of a greater team, and your organization needs the visibility to really know what to do. And that sort of got his attention. And then he realized he took the time to look at it, that in one screen, all he needs to do is update the amount and the stage. And it's really all that he needs to do. And then we even guide him to know which deal he needs to be updating. And I told him, I said, right now you're losing yourself in all this email treadmill because you're letting the activity of selling drive what you do, instead of you putting yourself on the driver's seat and knowing with certainty what part of the pipeline should I focus on, what deal should I focus on, and why. And that's really what it's all about. So keeping up simple numbers, simple information in the CRM, when you no longer look at it as Big Brother, but there's actually a purpose for the data, and there's a purpose that's going to help me as a salesperson to achieve my number, the chip changes.
Tell me how you measure me, and I'll tell you how I behave. Can you explain that concept that you talked about at the beginning?
Sure. I mean, I'm gonna give you another myth that I love to argue on, and it's the lovely pipeline coverage ratio. It's like you go to so many VPs of sales and sales leaders, and they're getting drilled with this accepted metric of, I need 3-to-1, right? If my quota is X, I need 3-to-1, because if not, I'm not going to hit it, right? Well, you know what? Tell me how you measure me, and I'll tell you how I behave. The next conversation I always have is, why do reps not like to kill deals? Why do reps love to let deals just sit there? Well, if you're measuring me based on pipeline coverage ratio, you're 100% motivating the behavior of not killing deals, because I need to keep up my pipeline coverage ratio, right? So we need to know that anytime we set a KPI in place, we're ultimately motivating a particular behavior that could be unintended. So that's why for us, this proactive process first approach allows you to really drive the behavior of flow, right? Healthy pipelines have flow. Deals need to flow. And we need to accept reality sometime that maybe we need more deals in different places of the pipeline. But the fact is, if I'm not realistic with myself and I'm not measuring the right KPIs, I'm going to ultimately motivate the wrong behavior.
Why do you think we're so inclined towards reactivity in business?
I mean, the first thing is obviously because we're very outcome focused, right? And we have to be. Organizations without sales and without profit cease to exist. So it's absolutely something that we have to do. And also, for many, many years, we haven't had the access to information that could allow us to be informed, to be able to make decisions and put process first without it becoming stifling bureaucracy, right? I think there's a delicate balance between letting process become king and become bureaucratic, and then being so chaotic and entrepreneurial that process is ignored. And obviously, somewhere in the middle is where we have utopia, right? And we have to find that balance as we continue to move. And I think it's very easy in the world of results to become reactive, to just focus on what's most urgent. So I think it requires an acceptance or a prioritization that I need to take the time to understand what's going on underneath, to put the right process in place, to then become proactive. And it's like with health. You don't fight the battle overnight. You don't win the battle overnight. It takes a lot of very consistent, good, small decisions to get the flywheel going in your direction.
How has our culture of instant results contributed to this problem?
Yeah, I mean, uh, I'm 51 years old, and I think back to what my life was like at the age of what my kids are now, 23 and 21, and I'm grateful I didn't have Instagram and social media, right? It's created this mindset of instant gratification and things happening overnight that, I mean, there's a lot smarter and more socially expert people that have talked about this subject. But I think it's real. I think we think that things are supposed to happen overnight. Now everybody thinks that you just take AI and you plug it into a problem and you get a magic answer the next day. And the truth is that, things that are worthwhile take time, right? Somebody told me one day, it's great to be a 30-year overnight success. And I kind of like that saying, right? Like it's the understanding that good things take time and they take layers. I think allows us to focus on deeper issues and not just focus on the immediate result, which results in more chaotic environments, I think.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, to your example alone, when you grew your company for 12 years before you had your exit. I mean, that's a 12-year long overnight success.
That's right. I mean, the dev team at Intelligence, they all have heard this saying many, many times. But I always say, if it's easy, anybody could do it, right? And I think we all have to realize that uh, if we pick worthwhile challenges, it'll require of us. Things always take longer. They always cost more than we think when we start. But at the end of the day, if we're committed to the outcome and to the result, and we put the right processes in place, they'll happen.
What misconceptions do people have about implementing processes?
I mean, I think the biggest one that I always hear is, if I focus on process, I'm not going to be flexible. I'm not going to be entrepreneurial anymore. And I think that the fear of becoming bureaucratic, becoming, stifling creativity, I think it's a misnomer, right? I think it's the mixture of the two. I think that's the greatest fear that people have. And it also takes patience. I think that's a very closely related second place to the first one, because um, I think a lot of times people just want to deal with what's in front of them. I think it's a lot
Mhm.
easier to let your task list or let what's urgent drive your day than to take a step back and think about what is it that I should accomplish today. But I think the biggest one is the first one. I mean, I have fought this multiple times with different people, whether in building a business or building a new department inside of a larger business. Taking the time to think about the process and put it in place, or then committing to the process, right? I've also seen many times people write up a nice little document with the process, and then when it comes time to follow it, they say, that's okay. We'll just do it this way.
Where's
And
that
I
SOP
guess
again?
exactly.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you a quick story. When we built our business, the prior business with my business partners, we grew to 75 people. And I think anybody that has hired people knows that the hardest part of the equation is finding good people and putting them in the right seat on the bus. And we figured out the process of hiring that worked for us. We figured it out. And there's this one particular example where we got this resume from someone and we looked at it and we said, "Oh, this is so good that we're going to ignore the process because it's just a sure fail. Like, it's just for sure it's going to work." Lasted 6 weeks. Lasted 6 weeks. And so we learned our lesson, right? Like, when you trust the process protects you.
Mhm. To that point, what results have you seen when companies shift from what they're doing to a process driven approach?
I mean, there's a few that we see, right? I mean, some of the measurable metrics. Obviously, the one that everybody wants to know is how much did revenues go up. But that's something that depends on where we found the organization originally, right?
Mm-hmm.
Were there untapped potential,
Mm-hmm.
and how much could revenue increase? And we have seen that happen. But some of the measurable ones is we've seen over 100% increase in utilization of the CRM in a very short period of time. And I love that one because
Yeah.
to get reps to understand the importance of updating my information because the data matters is has massive consequences long term. Not just the better data, but also if they're updating their CRM, guess what? They're becoming process driven. They're not depending on their little notepad or an email or their latest memory. So they're actually using the CRM for what the CRM should be used. So we've seen that repeatedly, which is massive, right? I think the other place that we've seen measurable results is much more focused execution on the pipeline they have, or even on their marketing spend. Because when you actually get the visibility of knowing what's driving my outcomes instead of guessing what's driving my outcomes, it just takes that to a different level, right? So at the end of the day, business is a combination of product, people, and process, right? And I think when you can get those three working well together, you're going to have a great company, great results.
When we were chatting before we got here to record, you were telling me some story about a management meeting that, if, I don't know if you remember that one off the top of your head, but there's a management meeting or something where you all were discussing something, and then your approach has evolved because you kind of took a step back and did more of a process driven approach. Is that recall?
Yeah.
Is that recalling anything? I'm sure you've had a bunch of management meetings since. So
No, 100%. I mean, I think I know what we were talking about, and I was a terrible delegator. I was just, when I started my prior business with my partners, I was 38 years old. I was a type A, hard worker, high achiever, that had a lot of blinders, like we all do, and I still have, and we all still have, and we work them out through life. But I was a terrible delegator, and I thought I was a good delegator, but I was terrible. And the reason I was terrible was because I was focused on solving the problem at hand. When you truly delegate, you have to be patient and you have to have a process in place. So since my last exit and now focusing on building this new business, um, my approach is much different, which is always empower and figure out what part of the process is broken instead of just solving the problem at hand. And I think specifically what we were chatting about was we had an issue that at the end of the day was a communication issue between sales and marketing and development. And when the issue came up, my natural reaction as my 38-year-old self or 40-year-old self probably would have been, let's fix this now. Instead, I realized, what we really need to do here is establish a really good communication system between sales and marketing and development so this kind of issue doesn't happen again. That's what I'm talking about, a process first approach. And hopefully over time, it'll lead to less gray hairs and better sleep.
yeah, for sure. What, just out of curiosity, what was that issue? Because I'm sure we've all ran into very similar ones, but for the audience, what was the issue that you all were dragging out, and then what was kind of the solution that you all got to?
I mean, it was really something as simple as sales and marketing getting notified of some issues that gotten taken care of and some new features that were being added to the product so that it could be communicated back to the customer, right? Something as simple as that, instead of just assuming that somehow it's going to be known, establishing a repeatable system where every week there is a notification that goes out announcing the new features. I mean, stuff that probably sounds like obvious, but as you're building a business, it's these little obvious things that when you take the time to put a repeatable process in place over time, it takes care of things.
I was just in a meeting with some teams, and they were unpacking how they run things and everything. And there was four different tabs that they could fill out for who the owner was, who the assignee was, who the uh, deal manager was. And it was things like that where it's like, to me, I'm coming in the outside. I'm like, hey, what are the definitions of these? And as we were talking about it, we quickly realized, hey, actually, nobody in the room really truly knows what these definitions are. So there's a lot of things that people, depending on the way you look at it, it's like, hey, what's the difference between an assignee and an owner? And they're all sitting there like, well, I guess they use owner, we use assignee. And it's like, oh, but it's the same thing. It's like, yeah. So, there's so many of these type of things that, to your point, it's like unless you sit down and draw out the process, everyone's just operating with assumptions. What type of realistic results, or what realistic results should listeners expect when they start moving in a process driven approach versus more of a reactive approach?
I think there's going to be, first of all, you're going to start getting a lot of insights of what's really driving your outcomes. I think you're also going to start to, the way that I refer to that is really recognize what is a symptom and what's a root cause. And I think that's really what's going to start to happen as step one.
Mm.
I think step two is you're going to start to find ways to really look deeper at process, which will start to actually bring your team together more. Because when you take the time as a leader to peel back, then it starts to draw in the people that have insights that you're probably not hearing or not knowing because you're not taking the time to peel it back. And that's a very powerful outcome. And to me, the third step is, how do I build a plan to address those root problem and those root causes? And that's what starts to get you moving forward and putting plans in place that ultimately will affect your outcomes.
Mm. Where do you feel like people typically get this wrong?
Well, I mean, I what comes to mind is two things. First of all, is an unwillingness to do it, um,
Mm.
or a lack of commitment to see it through, right? Just like with, if I want to lose weight and I cut out sugar, I'm not going to lose weight in 2 days. I need to give my body time to lose its addiction to the sugar or start to burn fat and all these different things. It's the same in companies, right? We're not going to get overnight results. So there has to be a belief and a commitment to doing it. So I think that that's one way they get it wrong. And
Mm.
another way they get it wrong, and I've seen this, um, is all of a sudden you're going to appeal to the personality of people that love process, and then you can't stifle entrepreneurship and creativity, right? So that's where the leader has to really come in and know, when do you have to be, and I think we talked about this, on the white side of gray, right? In the world of business, we don't have black and white. I mean, black and white doesn't really exist. I don't think even in accounting, black and white exists, right? Like 1 + 1, it depends. But you gotta be on the white side of gray. And what I mean by that is, you gotta lean on the side of process first, but you can't stifle creativity and entrepreneurship, because then you're not gonna move forward, you're not gonna evolve, and you're not gonna continue to hopefully achieve the results you want to achieve.
How do you balance that when you're seeing it in a meeting where you're starting to notice it's getting a little too dark? It's we're not as much, this gray is becoming more darker and darker as the moment goes, or rather, yeah, lighter and lighter. It's becoming too white. Like, how do you balance that utopia, that middle ground?
I think there's a very important factor in teams, and it goes back down to communication, and the willingness and the ability for people to express themselves. I think when process is taking over and becoming king and stifling creativity, is when people are no longer willing to speak up and give their opinion. So
Mm.
I think that that's where you really need to find the balance. If people are having debate, if people are willing to challenge the system, challenge the process, then you have a good balance. But if all of a sudden people that feel like they're just supposed to stand in line, or follow the line and follow the manual, then I think you've stifled the creativity that is what makes humans different at the end of the day than anything else.
Mm. For those who want to keep exploring down down this path, is there any good resources that have influenced your thinking or that you keep going back to that you would suggest either check out or find or get?
I've got a book that I read for the first time, I think in like 2002 maybe, or 2003. And I literally give it to every single person I hire, and it's Good to Great. Um, I've read a lot of books. I've been fortunate to go to some good schools and learn some good things. But I think the way that Jim Collins kind of broke down some very fundamental parameters of business that are building blocks independent of industry, independent of sector, independent of public, private. It's an awesome book to give you a very solid foundation of how to bring all these things together. So I think that one is what I would recommend more than anything else.
Mm. What's one action listeners should immediately take after this episode?
Commit to process, commit to taking the time to look at what's going on when something aggravates you, when something is an issue. Just take the time to ask yourself, what's the root cause? And don't just take things at face value, thinking that I just got to fix this and move on. I think if you just start there, you're gonna slowly but surely affect the way that you do things. And if you're in the world of sales, sales is an art, but it's driven by process. And if you're in that world, you've gotta believe that.
Juan, let's shift gears because selfishly, I want to talk more about what you've been developing. This has been your unpacking on this topic is been phenomenal. It's been really fun. Right now, when are people coming to you? What are the questions that are in there? First off, it sounds like we've talked a lot about sales leaders, so it sounds like mostly head of sales, VP of sales, sales managers, anyone who's, I'm assuming, managing a pipeline is the best audience, correct?
Yes, for the most part, or people that have been tasked with the sales operations. But the pain holder tends to be that VP of sales or that sales manager that's responsible for the quota. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, I promise this to the company leadership. Is it actually going to happen? Yeah, that
Yeah.
middle ground. Are we actually going to hit the numbers this next quarter, the quarter after, whatever? Right? Yeah, perfect.
Yep.
Okay, so what are the top things that they're coming to you with? What's give me a sense and give the audience a sense of what's going on in their minds, what's going on in their lives, like what are they looking at?
I think the number one pain point, which is really the manifestation of a lot of what we've talked about, is very difficult and poor reporting. So when people are looking at reports, what they're looking for is give me insights of what I should do next. Give me insights of where I stand versus what I promised the company. And either they have unreliable reports or a very manual process for reports or very people dependent reporting where data gets a lot of manual manipulation to produce the report. They end up getting frustrated because they realize the CRM is not up to date. That's sort of the tip of the iceberg, right? But inevitably, when they come to us and we tell them we can fix all of the reporting issues, but that's an outcome of really fixing the core problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the core problem is a CRM implementation that's not aligned with their true sales and marketing process. That's really at the heart of the problem. And then from there, the intelligent algorithms and the predictability and the insights takes over, and it all of a sudden makes reporting and having data hygiene a natural outcome of this process first approach.
It makes a lot of sense to me, but I think some of our listeners may be a little confused. Can you connect the dots? How does a guy who's running this huge real estate portfolio jump into running a sales technology pipeline management company? How did that come about?
That's a good question, and there's a lengthy story, but I'll make it brief. I think
That might be our
all the way.
next episode. Keep going.
When I go all the way back to grad school in the mid to late 90s to today, there has been a consistent theme independent of industry. I spent 6 years in tech, then I went over to real estate. Real estate really appealed to me, and I think it was while I was doing my postgraduate work where I really understood. Later on, I did an executive postgraduate work for business owners. I really understood that what I was very passionate about was on building teams and building process. And so whether you're building a real estate investment management company, whether you're building a tech company, what you're ultimately doing is you're putting process in place, you're putting teams together. And these algorithms which had been created in the real world inside of a business, which I had learned from, and then I inherited. That's ultimately what they do. Right now, with the sophisticated and advanced cloud-based solutions and AI and machine learning, what we have available to us today, we're able to really put this on hyperdrive in terms of how fast we can get it done. And that's ultimately what motivated me to exit my real estate business and dedicate myself to this, because not only am I being able to do it in my business and building my business, but now I'm being able to take it to the world, right? And go out and bring this benefit of process and a systematic way to run sales. I've been selling my whole life to multiple businesses, to hundreds of businesses and thousands of businesses around the world. That's very motivating to me, and hopefully something that can bring positive impact to a lot of organizations.
That's awesome. That's so cool. Now, for a quick snapshot, because obviously people are going to be, some people are watching this, some people are listening to this. Can you explain exactly what the platform does at a high level? Like what have you all built? Because we all have, a lot of us have our CRMs. We have our dashboards, we have our reporting, and the goal is to always constantly refresh those dashboards to make them more and more dynamic so we can actually use them in a meeting and make them applicable. But we're usually far away from that. So what is Inselligence? What did you guys do with the platform? What did you solve?
I'm going to start with an analogy, and then we'll dive deeper, right? We ultimately are a revenue navigation platform. So think about Waze. When Waze came to our world, we simply put an address of where we want to be, and Waze gives us 4 different ways that we can get there and how long it's going to take us to get there, right? When we had static information, a static map, static addresses, we could know where we were. We could maybe calculate speed on a highway. We could do a lot of things, but we wouldn't get real-time proactive predictability of all the different ways that I could go to get to my destination. In the world of sales, that's what Inselligence is. We connect, plug and play. There's no technical implementation. We just connect with any of the CRMs out there. And immediately what we tell you is, based on the multiple variables that people, some of them they've thought about, others they haven't, based on all these different variables, this is how much you should be selling. But then what happens is you start to peel back, right? So like in the world of Waze, let's keep the analogy going. Maybe I don't want to use a toll road, right? So maybe in the world of sales, I really don't want to be doing a particular behavior or focusing on a particular segment of clients. And so as you start to fine tune those business decisions, which is really what implementing Inselligence is about, in a matter of weeks, you can take your starting point of your data and then structure with pipeline segmentation exactly the roadmap that I want to go on to get to my number. But it doesn't stop there, right? Because if Waze just gave you the options at the start and then let you be, and then there was a traffic jam on the highway and it didn't proactively tell you need to exit and go around this traffic jam, it was incomplete. And that's what Inselligence does, right? It gives you to the day, to the moment you're logging on, It tells you exactly whether or not you're on track, whether or not your deal cadence and the number of deals you're adding is the right number, whether you have the right number of deals at each step, so that with certainty you can know I'm falling behind, or maybe I'm ahead and I'm going to exceed my quota. I can exceed my quota. All of these things is what we do in a very plug and play way. And it allows you to get a lot more out of the investment you've already made in your CRM.
That's awesome. That's great. Yeah, I've firsthand experience of checking it out. It's amazing how fast being able to plug it. I mean, literally, it's like the wheel spins a few times and then boom, I'm seeing my data live, which is nuts. So Juan has been gracious enough to offer anyone who listens to this, if you reference the podcast, he'll do a scan. I don't know how limited time this is that you're willing to do this, Juan, but right now he'll actually pull up and do a scan of your CRM, show you your data live, and give you that snapshot, which is pretty cool. So Juan, if people want to get in contact with you, what is the best way to reach out to you and get in contact?
Sure. It's just email me. Super easy. My email is just my first initial and last name. So jdeangulo@intelligence.com. And we're happy to connect, happy to plug and play to your data and give you a free assessment of what we see and what we could do for you.
Awesome. Juan, thanks so much for coming on. It's been such a fun time unpacking this. I think there's so many lessons. Even me, I'm sitting here going, man, there's like 5 or 6 processes that came to mind that I need to address now. So I really appreciate you unpacking that and talking through this episode.
Thanks for having me on, Josh. It's been a pleasure. And talking about RevOps and how to make people better and process, I really appreciate it. And look forward to the next one.